Okay, I think we might start though. Thank you so much all for coming. I know a lot of you actually have been here for the last 15 minutes, so very nice to have you. My name is Teresa Wong. I'm Natural Resources Officer in Climate Change for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, working at the Regional Office for the Near East and North Africa. Just want to welcome everyone to this session, the fourth session of this thematic day, the fourth and last. Hopefully there's not one after this, called Watering the NDCs and NAPs. This session or this thematic day has been curated by FAO, WaterAid, and World Wildlife Fund for US, and it's being broadcasted live, and we do have people online as well. And I just also want to acknowledge my colleague online who is not here, Virginie Gillet, who is from the Land and Water Division in FAO, and she's been organizing this session also with our partners, and I think also has contacted all of you. So welcome to this session. This session is live streamed with participants on site, and online participants can't speak, but they can also provide comments and questions in the chat box I don't know if we can load that up. So the objectives of this session is to look at the integration and the alignment of the Water Action Agenda with climate plans, right? NDCs, NAPs, and the other plans. So I think we have a very nice group of speakers from different countries and from different contexts who can tell us a little bit more about how this integration is being done in all these different contexts. So we do have a Mentimeter exercise, and I don't know how easy it is, or everyone's reached up for their phones, which is the right thing to do. You've just been primed to do this, right, for Mentimeter. So, not the right sound? Okay. I don't know how easy it is to do this. The code, I think it would be really preferable we had the code on screen or Zoom on projected. Okay, very good. Yeah. Okay.
It is actually, I'm sorry, I'm Virginie Gillet. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you all to attend, but I believe the code is very small on the screen.
Okay.
Especially I see now it's going away.
Okay.
So I might say out loud the code also, or you want
I
to
can
do
say,
it like that?
yeah, I can
Yeah,
say the
please.
code, and Virginie can put it in the chat. It's 1689 4633. Sorry, yeah. I forgot to tell you, you have to go to menti.com. Sorry. So menti.com, and then you put in the code 1689 4633. So that's 1689 4633. And 2 questions to be answered. Any useful tools you recommend for greater integration of water in NDCs and NAPs? 1689 4633. Thank you. No, thank you for asking. Okay. So we'll wait a few seconds for this. Okay. It's 1689 4633. Very good. Virginie, are we drawing up any responses?
Not yet, apparently, so I will reshare my screen as soon as I get some, because I tried to share, but we had no answer. Okay. So let me go back.
We'll wait a few seconds and to see if there might be a bit tricky with this hybrid format, I think. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you should be seeing at least 2 answers that we got.
We're not able to see the shared screen if you're doing that. We're waiting for it to come up.
I'm doing that. I don't know. Can the IT people share the screen I have on Zoom?
Okay, we have three
Three
responses.
answers.
So, practical suggestions for accelerating achievement of the 2023 agenda, water agenda, NDCs and NAPs. Direct funding to communities on the ground. Thank you. Dedicated water finance. And the last one, integrating water into mitigation measures. Planning in the NDC will help to achieve the agenda. I think I need glasses. I need to buy a new phone because I lost mine and glasses. Okay, thank you so much. Is there another question or that's it? Virginie.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was just to start with.
Very glad to hear your voice, Virginie, because you've been a big part of this session. But right now, I think let's have our introductory keynote presentation. I'd like to introduce Cameron McBrown-Fitcherer from the University of North Carolina, who's online and who'll give us a keynote. If you could take slightly less than 10 minutes so that we can make sure we'll fit everybody in. Thank you. Over to you, Cameron.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll do my best to move quickly. Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen. And is everything appearing clearly for everyone? Yes. All right, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron. I'm a recent master's graduate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And beginning in the late summer, I had the great pleasure of working with an ongoing Water Action Agenda, or WAA, analysis project that is heading into its next phases into the new year. And I'll be arriving in Dubai later this week, but I'm pleased to be able to join you remotely today from North Carolina. So first, just some background. I'll move quickly through this part since I know it's not new to many people here, but the UN 2023 Water Conference was held in March of this year and was the first high-level dialogue on water in almost 50 years, which is an incredible milestone, as we know. So a key outcome of the conference, of course, was the Water Action Agenda. And since the conference, the WA has collected over 800 commitments aimed at achieving SDG 6 and other water-related goals. So after the conference, the Water Institute here at UNC wanted to set up a project that would take a closer look at the WA commitments. And the project set forth with the following goals. First, to identify and classify the commitments. This essentially addresses the who, what, where, and when questions. Next, the project wants to evaluate the commitments. So the goal here is to go beyond some of the surface level information and extract different factors from the text, making deductions along the way. A main point of emphasis has been quote-unquote SMART criteria, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The SMART acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And this encapsulates many of the qualities we would expect to find in a good commitment. In essence, it signals that authors thought critically about their submission. Third, the project wants to compare the WAA to similar processes in other sectors. Other sectors such as climate and oceans already have experience with similar conferences and commitment frameworks, such as the Global Climate Action Portal, the Marrakech Partnership, the 2017 Oceans Conference, and therefore they can offer beneficial lessons for the water sector. And lastly, the team wants to make actionable recommendations that can help strengthen any and all future commitments. So, what kinds of information have we been able to extract so far? Well, here's a non-exhaustive list of some of the key categories of information the team is collecting, some of which are plainly listed in the submissions and others which require some degree of inference. So actor type, this is simply the type of organization the authors list themselves as, NGOs, governments, private sector, etc. Information about geography, where are the authors based, where are commitment actions taking place, are national authors committing to actions within their own borders or elsewhere, tracking timelines, of course, when will actions take place and what are the deadlines, measurability, that's pretty key. This is looking at have authors provided some sort of quantifiable metric that can be used to track progress. Action type, this categorizes the general nature of an action. Does it focus on infrastructure improvements, policy, plans, maybe community outreach? M&E, this is monitoring and evaluation. We also have things like whether a commitment is explicitly aimed at benefiting any vulnerable groups, such as children or refugees. And last on this abbreviated list is linkages to other SDGs. So naturally, the vast amount of submissions touch upon SDG 6 in some way, but authors also had the ability to mark other SDGs that their actions could impact. So, excuse me, I've noted here what I consider the unofficial phases of our project. So the first phase wrapped up about a month and a half ago, and that concluded by supporting a plenary discussion at UNC's Water and Health Conference. This work extracted information for all 187 commitments submitted by governments. More specifically, it focused on evaluating commitments authored by LMIC member states. The next phases, which are underway and expected to progress into the new year, will complete extraction for all the remaining commitments with, of course, the ultimate goal of providing some actionable recommendations for the future. So with that background, let's dive into a selection of some of the preliminary observations and get into where this work might intersect with the climate sector. So this graphic represents every commitment. The collected data available to us at the outset of the project included 764 of the 841 commitments. So that's well over 90% that we're looking at with a closer view. And so here's that 764 number broken down by actor type, which provides an overview of what types of groups were active in the commitment-making process. The main thing you'll notice here is that NGOs really led the pack, with 255 commitments in total, 33% of all submissions. And so governments are also submitted a fair number, around 24%, and then other groupings, the private sector, academic institutions, civil society, and others fall into the single-digit percentages. This next slide is one method we found useful when looking at the government commitments analyzed in phase 1. So this illustrates the sort of narrowing effect that happens when you apply multiple elements of SMART and related criteria. You'll notice that of the 187 total government commitments, around half reported clear timelines with clear start and end dates. Then well under half, however, were deemed to be measurable. And then as we start to layer multiple factors together, so measurable and time-bound, for example, just 42 of the 187 overcome that hurdle, which is around 22%. And it's a similar story if we look at those commitments that mention alignment with official plans or policies, commitments that include methods towards M&E, and then at the very bottom of the funnel here, we have just 9 government commitments that meet all of the mentioned criteria. So now let's focus in on how we might identify commitments that have overlap with climate action and what those commitments might look like. So I mentioned before that authors were able to log other SDGs relevant to their actions. And we can use this as a decent proxy for finding commitments that target water and climate together by concentrating on those that reported overlap with SDG 13, making urgent action to combat climate change. So here we see that among the 255 NGO commitments, 132, or about 52%, report addressing SDG 13. 6 of these targets, target just SDG 6 and SDG 13 alone. So here's that same graphic, but for the 187 government submissions. So we have a similar percentage here, just over 48%, that report a linkage with SDG 13. And in fact, among both the government and NGO groupings, SDG 13 is the most commonly reported linkage of the 16 SDGs that are not SDG 6. So clearly there's a strong relationship and a lot of good energy surrounding linkages between the water and climate sectors. And if we use SDG 6 and 13 as proxies. So as reported by commitment authors, climate action is something of a point of emphasis, especially in comparison to other SDG subject matter. And here we see that funnel graphic from earlier, but now applied to government commitments that reported overlap with SDG 13. And if we compare this to the other funnel, we notice that the percentages here are largely similar. The government commitments reporting SDG 13 linkages fare much better on time-bound and plan and policy alignment criteria, the latter of which is quite encouraging, but while the other figures are very close to the other percentages we saw earlier. So ultimately, I think this illustrates that there do exist good opportunities, especially as tracking progress on existing commitments continues and new commitments are formed in the future, to encourage authors to reach that next level of strength. So of course, the bigger picture here, and hopefully this sets the stage a bit for the remainder of today's session, is what value does sectoral overlap and commitments bring? And this is probably quite obvious to many of us here, but it's worth reinforcing as we get ready to explore this topic a bit more. So first, overlap can serve to foster and strengthen dialogue between sectors. The more intersectoral conversation that takes place, the more we can learn from one another. And of course, encountering new or different perspectives can in turn lead to new ideas and solutions. Secondly, overlap unlocks the power of co-benefits and shows that many organizations are truly thinking about how they can have an impact on more than one area of need within the umbrella of sustainability. And this helps yield the most benefit from the resources that are available to us. And so what do these instances of overlap really look like when we get a closer view? Well, here's just a brief summary from the preliminary work conducted so far. And generally, we can see that few of the proposed actions that overlap with climate focus strictly on infrastructure improvements. Rather, some of the common actions that we see among commitments with overlap include creating new plans, engaging in integrated water resource management, establishing new community organizations or outreach programs, and similarly, establishing new community educational programs. So just some key takeaways as my time comes to an end and we move on to the rest of the session. But first, we can acknowledge that the UN 2023 Water Conference and the WAA were kind of a new foundation for dialogue and commitment making within the water sector. I think this is pretty clear based just upon the simple fact that it was the first major dialogue in nearly 50 years. Next, tracking and analyzing WAA commitments has opened the door to identifying commitment overlap with the climate sector. And while this was not one of our project's central goals at its inception, this exercise is evidence that this data set can and will provide a wide array of future possibilities and pathways. Third, a preliminary examination shows that we might expect around 50% or so of commitments to report overlap with climate action and SDG 13. At least this is held true within the largest commitment group submitted by NGOs and governments. SDG 13 is the most common reported linkage in these groups, which suggests a strong interest in projects that have co-benefits for water and climate. And some of these commitments with overlap meet elements of the SMART criteria, but as we saw, there is ample room to make these commitments more robust. And as was just mentioned, a minority of actions focus on infrastructure. Instead, many actions seem to concentrate on planning, resource management, and community engagement. And so with that, I want to thank FAO, WaterAid, and WWF for the invitation to speak today. I also want to acknowledge and extend a big thank you to all of those in the UNC Water Institute that have been involved in this project and remain involved in pushing the work forward, from Institute leadership to the hardworking student teams that are making things possible. I hope this offered a good introduction to the WAA, and I look forward to the remainder of the session today. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Okay, if you're hearing an applause from the room, and we also have quite a full room at this time of the day in the conference, so thank you for that presentation, and it's a lot of interest, I think, in the water action agenda, and then you've really try to show us where it crosses with SDG 13 and climate action. And I think this is a very valuable foregrounding of the discussion that is to come. And if you're just joined us, we are at the fourth session of our thematic day on watering the NDCs and NAPs, and curated by FAO, WaterAid, and WWF US. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight to the panel. And we will go in order that I have. We will have our panelists take on questions, and we will have 5 minutes, or as I said to someone, 4.5 minutes to answer each question, so that we'll have time for questions at the end. So we'll start off with Mr. Sultan Rahimzoda. He's the water envoy of the Republic of Tajikistan. And it's a question to you. So I've really started very quickly. So together with the Netherlands and Tajikistan, co-hosted the UN 2023 Water Conference in March, which is, I think, the focus of our discussion today, calling for actions and commitments which have been registered in the Water Action Agenda. So like coming from Cameron's presentation into the practical aspects of where this is happening in countries, do you see, how do you like to see the WAA and the climate plans align? And how ideally could their synergies accelerate the achievement of the SDGs? And tell us about the case in Tajikistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa, for inviting me. It's an honor to be with you. Let's start maybe with the connectivity between water and climate. Naturally, water and climate too much interconnected. On the opening, I guess the Prince from the Netherlands mentioned 90% of climate impacts are water related, and 80% of mitigation actions are also climate mitigation actions are also water related. And naturally, we see that water under high impact of climate change and the glacier melting, the change of the hydrological cycle is the vivid example of that indeed. And the water plays an important role for mitigation and adaptation. But let's see on our action. Naturally, they are too much interconnected. But on the action, when it comes to climate action, starting maybe from the Paris Agreement, there is no word of water in the Paris Agreement. Fortunately, we have been witnessing the clear role of water in climate agenda, starting from COP26 in Glasgow. First time we had the water pavilion. In COP27 we had water day. We had for the first time in the history of the climate COPs water in the cover decision outcome, negotiated outcome documents of that. And fortunately, in this COP, we have stronger position and voice of water, including all those events being organized, held, for example, yesterday, the Water Action Summit with participation of the heads of state and the government and MDBs. That is good signal indeed. And I would like also to thank Cameron, if he's online still, with the presentation of the analysis of the Water Action Agenda. It's another, basically, we had the first one from the World Resource Institute, and the second one, and we see that the presence of climate in water agenda is very visible. More than or around 50% of actions, they are water related. SDGs 13 are there. When it comes to climate again, unfortunately, water is not there, but we are doing a lot in this regard, and we see some good progress on that. And now, indeed, I mean that if we will be transforming our actions in the manner how nature do it, I think it will bring really benefit for the climate and the water agenda. So we need to have the integrated water and climate solutions to achieve our climate goals, to achieve our water goals. And Water Action Agenda, what is the documents in the climate in terms of the financing, in terms of the action? I said, so I hope much that we will be having a much support, the greater support of the member states to have the stronger position of water in the negotiated outcome document of COP28, but also in the climate plans, in climate finance. Yesterday, sorry, the event which was organized basically by Tajikistan, the Netherlands, UAE, and the MDBs in terms of the accelerating our water and climate actions. So we had two great commitments financially. One, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from UAE announced the pledge of UAE to allocate 150 million USD for water scarcity issues, to address water scarcity issues. The second one, the president of the Islamic Development Bank highlighted the commitments on behalf of all MDBs to increase, double the number of peoples in the next 3 years receiving the benefit from the financing projects from MDB. So he mentioned, I guess, that for the last 5 years, the MDB's investments in water sector globally made around 9.6 billion USD. But reality, the need is much, much higher. So he mentioned that we need basically, I guess, 6.8 trillion USD, if I don't mistake, for until 2030 for water sector to achieve the water goals. And by 2050, it will be 22.6 trillion USD. That is figures which is much beyond the capacity of the banks, of the governments, and that is an area we have to mobilize our efforts to work together, the governments, MDBs, we have to involve private sector and the others, and most importantly, to consider any actions in water and climate through the integrated approach. Then it will work really. I mean that very fortunately, the Water Action Agenda is a live document. So my understanding how we can now feed into Water Action Agenda, so these kind of commitments should be registered in the Water Action Agenda. Water Action Agenda should be the only space, from my point of understanding, to collect all the actions. It could be, I mean, they're somehow linked to those processes, including maybe Dushanbe water process, the Bali World Water Forum. Yes, if there is a political need for that, for the visibility of the country, their input in that agenda. But all of those commitments should be registered in one platform with clear understanding what's going on. And then for this kind of institution, also it would be easier to analyze. And for us, I think, for the governments, for those who are on board in this process, it will be much easier to monitor and also to provide the reporting platform and etc. So my understanding, I mean that this could be for water sector, and for the climate sector, we have to work more to have stronger position and voice of water in negotiated outcome documents, in the climate financing structures. Then it will work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sultan Rahimzoda from the Republic of Tajikistan. Very clear, talking about the gap in terms of action on that interconnected nature of water and climate, but also then ending up also in the finance gap. Now, actually, turning also to the other partner, the other co-host of the UN 2023 Water Conference, we have Evita Rosenberg, a policy officer for water, representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. So the other host of the conference, maybe sort of the same question, looking at the kinds of commitments that the Netherlands have included in the Water Action Agenda, including one on the water climate nexus and one, a NAP related to the delta and coastal areas. From these perspectives, how do you see the synergies between the action agenda and climate plans?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. And first off, it's really great to be here. And well, Sultan, thank you, Sultan, just perfectly said that, as you all know, it's quite special that we're here together at the Water for Climate Pavilion at COP, because it hasn't been here for all that long. And that is much in line also with one of the objectives that we have for the UN Water Conference, which was all about breaking out of our silos. And as the water sector, well, I think most of the water people know that we cannot achieve our water-related goals and targets without doing so. So I'm very happy that we're having this session today also at COP, and in particular about watering NOPs and NDCs. And maybe just to before getting back to your question, Teresa, because I will, a little bit about myself, because I grew up in a country, the Netherlands, which is a low-lying delta, and I live personally below sea level. So working in the water sector, it is very hard to ignore the effects that climate change has on people, and that climate change manifests itself through water, droughts, floods, and so on. So getting back to your question on the synergy between the Water Action Agenda and climate plans, I think it is definitely getting there. We're doing much, much better getting into the climate sector. I'm personally, as a water person, a wash person, I'm at a climate conference for the very first time. So I'm also getting personally to know the climate sphere. But I think also Cameron's presentation, and thank you, Cameron, for that, very clearly shows that 50% of the commitments in the Water Action Agenda were climate related. And now it is very important that we follow up, as my friend Sultan so well said. And as part of that, for example, Netherlands has a couple of commitments also in the Water Action Agenda, out of which a few were also mentioned yesterday during the high-level session. But one of them is also that we're supporting the NDC partnership. And I just want to highlight this particular partnership because, well, fortunately, 90% of the NDCs include, or the governments include, water. But the problem now is, as Sultan also mentioned, is the lack of financing to implement and act on those. And I think that is a really interesting sphere where we now have to work on. How can we ensure that those plans are worked on in collaboration with the finance sector, with the private sector, to create bankable projects, so we can actually follow up and implement those. And I'll stop here, but I'm really pleased to see that this pavilion is bringing the ambitions and the messages of New York to Dubai, where we can put water at the heart of climate action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evita, for short and sweet, but also bringing up the NDC partnership, which is where a lot of these requests for actual support, for coming from countries actually come out to the fore and also get a little bit distributed to us, so we kind of know some of the priorities. And again, flagging finance, which is now coming up twice already, so early in the panel. So thank you, Evita, and hope we have more chance for more questions and more interventions after this. I'm very pleased to go now to Ms. Atal Estigarribia, the Director of the Division of Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Paraguay.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you.
I will ask a question. Your question is, you are preparing it says NAP here, but I think a GCF NAP readiness project to submit, ready for submission on an adaptation plan for focusing on water resources. Yes. Could you explain more about this project's objective and reflect how this aligns with the commitment to the Water Action Agenda?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Paraguay with the National Action Plan for the integrated management of water resource, which aims to accelerate progress in the country for the implementation of priority action. This action focus on the strengthening governance, improving the effective management of water resource, and promoting collaboration between actors linked to the waters. For example, the objective specific of the plan are strengthen the legal institutional framework for the planning and management of water resource, improve hydrometeorological monitoring at the national level, and contribute to risk management associated with the water sector, and promote and coordinate the generation of knowledge for the sustainable management. And finally, promotes public and private sector participation process in integrated water resource management. In line with this plan, a proposal for the National Water Resource Plan with a focus on adaptation to climate change is prepared with support from FAO, which seek to strengthen a national capacity for preparatory planning in the resource sector. For example, promoting resilience. In this proposal to validate the implementation in a basin with the intention of replicating the experience in other areas of the country with the similar characteristic. The principal objective that plan is the testing to design maximum impact adaptation solution, strengthening governance and of adaptation planning and institutional coordination, and the commitment of the private sector in adaptation. For us, the support of the Green Climate Fund through the NAP's readiness is considering essential to plan based on evidence of technical scientific rigor, and improve the coordination of resilience action at both the local and central level. Finally, the implementation of this proposal involves the collaboration of the stakeholder, including government, agency, private sector entity, and civil society organization. For this reason, interinstitutional work is key to achieve results that effectively help reduce the vulnerability of both the human resource and agriculture sector.
Thank you so much, Ethel. I think this is a really splendid opportunity because this is a NAP under submission, and you have incorporated in this NAP elements of designing sort of water interventions or sort of the coordination around water that is essential for also meeting the objectives of the agenda. Like, for example, you can bring the tools and the need for evidence, the kinds of assessments that the water sector is already so familiar with, and bring that into that coordination process that is centered on climate change. And I think that's very valuable. And I think a lot of us in this room need to see more of those opportunities. And thank you for sharing Paraguay's very good example, and wish you all the best for that implementation.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, now we're moving on, I think, to another two speakers in this panel, followed by our closing. But now for going to WMO, Nicholas Frank. He is here. Nicholas is here on behalf of the UN Water and Climate Expert Group, but he's also from WMO. And the question to you, representing UN Water, I guess. The UN Water Expert Group on Water and Climate has held, very recently an interesting workshop on the interdependencies between water and climate. Can you tell us more about the conclusions of this workshop? And I just have in my notes, interesting workshop. So you got to tell me more about the interesting workshop.
Why was it interesting?
And tell us why it's interesting. That's the most important thing. Wake us up a little bit. And tell us how we can accelerate the 2023 agenda and the objectives of the WAA. Thank you.
It was very interesting, yes.
Yeah.
And thanks for the question. And of course, I have my points to say now, but I also want to reflect a little bit on what has been said so far, because it fits actually pretty well to what we did in the workshop and what we're presenting here at COP and what we want to do moving forward. I thank also Cameron for his analysis, right? To know, okay, 50% actually of the water action agenda commitments relate somehow to climate, or relate to climate change action. And you just mentioned that 90%, Vita, of the NDCs have the water component, at least for adaptation, but we lack the funding to implement those actions. But yesterday, we also heard, before yesterday, I lost track of time in the high-level opening, right? The UAE president announced 30 billion fund to bridge the climate financing gap to accelerate the world's transition to low-emission growth economy, right? And what countries we found also through the water and climate leaders, where Tajikistan, the Netherlands, and many others are part of it, we found that parties negotiating here at COP have really a blind spot of the requirements for this low emission transition goals on the dependency of water, and to adapt to the impacts of climate change on water, to have that water available to achieve their climate mitigation measure, the reduction targets. So this is a way to communicate to the parties and to the ones that will be leveraging on those 30 billion, the need to use water as a solution to implement these goals. So this is a little bit the background, my reflection of what has been said so far. And Teresa, please cut me as soon as the 4.5 minutes are over. Probably I lost already 1 minute. But because of this blind spot, we organized this workshop at the Bonn Climate Change Conference, at the margins of the Bonn Climate Change Conference in June, to look into the interdependencies between water and climate mitigation targets. This was organized by the UN Water Expert Group on Water and Climate Change. These are co-coordinated by WMO, UNEC, and UNESCO. These are over 30 UN entities and over 40 partners that work on the subject matter, and we coordinate our work through that. So we invited there several experts to come and discuss these interdependencies. And we gathered the literature, we worked together with SIWI, with AGUA, with GIZ, with the pioneers working on this, in this area. And our assumptions really proved that water is indeed necessary as a climate solution to achieve the climate mitigation targets. But at the moment, at the global scale, we don't have the numbers. How much water do we actually need to implement these mitigation targets? How much water is available? How much water will I allocate for to my low emission energy transition measures, for carbon capturing, through wetlands restoration, through peatlands restoration, forestation? All these measures require water. And countries have this blind spot. So this was also the second finding. So the third finding was, okay, if you want to close this knowledge gap, to whom does the climate community here, or at least the political community within the climate sector here, to the IPCC. So we need the IPCC to make further assessments of these interdependencies, look into what is the latest research available on these interlinkages. And I'm glad to report you that we are already in touch with the new IPCC chair to pick that up in the next working cycle, which we'll start to discuss now in January. And we are in touch also with our country friends that are very well about these interlinkages. And I don't need to mention all the countries that are supporting us in this endeavor, to really bring these aspects into the COP and into the statements of national governments. Because, okay, WMO, we delivered our statement. We mentioned these interdependencies. It was, I think, at 10 p.m. in the evening on the first day. I don't know who listened to that. But if heads of states, ministers, governments, in their national statements mention that, the higher we get that into the priority level, that will be heard, and it gets into the cover statement, and then ultimately, hopefully, into the working groups of the UNFCCC, where we then as partners, and we see here in the Water Pavilion how many partners are working around this subject, can then support member states in this work. To conclude, I think, I'm probably running out of time already. The UN Water Expert Group, after this workshop, we got the mandate from the UN Water senior program managers, that's getting a little bit into the organizational details, to further look into what are the water requirements for the climate mitigation measures. And we are working together with the International University Climate Alliance. This is an alliance of top-level universities from around the world, who is helping us to compile the latest research and calculate these water volumes. And we presented these preliminary results at our WMO IPCC pavilion right next door on Pavilion 89, or 88, we are in 89 here, right? I'm getting lost. But it's on the UN Water website, there are preliminary results. And the lead researcher on that, they calculated that at the global scale, by 2030, just the clean energy mitigation measures are estimated to need around 900 cubic kilometers of water annually, whatever that means. But what that means is that equates to approximately 1/3 of the water withdrawn by irrigation globally. So you have to imagine, if we want to achieve the energy transition by 2030 to stay below 1.5, we will need 1/3 of the water that is currently withdrawn for irrigation globally. And we know that the agricultural sector consumes most of the water. So this is really these numbers we are really presenting to inform policymakers that they have this blind spot and they need to start looking into water. Global numbers are nice. We need, of course, the local numbers, because they're much more precise. How much of water is available? How much water are my mitigation measures consuming? But we need to start somewhere, and we started now there, and we will have the study hopefully finalized early next year, and UN Water will then draft a policy brief, an analytical brief, to support member states implement that into their indices.
Thank you, Nicolas. That's very clear message, and So something to look forward to as this report comes out. You rightly talk about the water requirements for climate action. Nobody really thinks about that. And you refer to a blind spot, which also goes back to Sultan's message in the beginning that we really do need much more action at the COP. And so thank you for bringing that circularity route. And your workshop was indeed interesting enough to report on. Thank you so much for making it interesting. We'll go to the last speaker of this panel, but don't leave yet because we do have a wrap-up speaker. To Anna Dupont, who's the Senior Policy Analyst for the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. And the question to you, Anna, is that we have passed both the carbon and also the freshwater planetary boundaries. There's two planetary boundaries that we have passed. And the Commission's publication, Turning the Tide, calls for collective action in order to turn the water crisis into an advantage. So how does this call join sides or align with the Water Action Agenda call to action? And what options should be considered to deliver the Water Action Agenda and also to maybe roll back our leap towards these planetary boundaries we're talking about?
Thank you. So the viability of our largest carbon stores, wetlands and forests, and numerous strategies for negative emissions, such as afforestation and bioenergy, depend on the availability of a stable water or hydrological cycle. This is fundamental because it means that protecting water, protecting biodiversity as mitigation strategies are just as important as a phase-out of fossil fuels. Leaders need to understand, and this is a good follow-up with what Nico said earlier, leaders need to understand that any actions to safeguard the water cycle is by extension an action to protect the climate and bolsters efforts to hold the 1.5 degrees target. The COP presidencies elevated the position of water. But what needs to happen next is to translate this signal into fast actions that comes in time to safeguard a stable hydrological cycle and a stable climate. Watering NDCs and NAPs are therefore keys. Furthermore, we must now provide a new conceptual framework for economics of water so as to catalyze investment and broader reforms across all policy domains. This process must include investing in water as a global common good and scaling up partnerships in the context of the Water Action Agenda. The Global Commission of the Economics of Water, the secretariat of which is hosted by the OECD, my organization, is funded by the Netherlands, thank you, but is an independent commission with a 2-year mandate that was launched in May 2022 and was set up for just that purpose. A couple of principles of the approach of the Global Commission, which will deliver its final report next year, is that one, we must recognize the interdependence of countries through the global and regional water cycle, and that water is increasingly intertwined with climate change. Unlike climate change and biodiversity, however, where the global nature of the problem is widely recognized and accepted, with water, we may be still at the stage where we are to determine the strength of the spatial, global connections, both physical and economic. Many in the water world simply do not recognize that water is materially significant, a global issue, having for decades been told that water is a local issue. It will take some work to convince people of that. Second, and related, though we all recognize that collective action is necessary, it cannot be willed by asking for nobler objectives when incentives are zero-sum. I am not sure there is a convincing model of global collective action which works at scale when incentives are sharply misaligned. Third, we need to move beyond externalities towards a new economic mindset whereby governments can value, govern, and finance water in a way that drives socio-economic transformation. Water-related externalities are not merely a market failure impacting a third party, it is a market failure that impacts generations. These failures destabilize the hydrological cycle. If you want transformational change, you need incentives which put public value at the center of production, distribution, and consumption. And this is the objective of the Global Commission.
Thank Thank you, Anna, for really bringing us back to the right, the common good that water is. And I think a lot of us in the water community really live by, and now making sure that that also connected to climate action. Thank you very much for this. And with this, we've actually come to the end of this panel. And I would very much like to invite the host of the 10th World Water Forum in 2024. And this is Mr. Tri Punajaya, Director for the Development and Economic and Environmental Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia. And Mr. Tri will, I think, come up here because there's a short of space, but come and speak. Given what he has just heard, in this panel, could you please wrap up by sharing what you think are the key messages, or one key message from this, and how Indonesia, as the host of this the World Water Forum, will bring these forward to further elevate the water and climate discussion. So I welcome Tri to the podium, and then I will just close with very few words after. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you to all of you for being here, and thank you to FAO and the organizers for inviting Indonesia. I'm very delighted and pleased to be here, and special thanks to all the brilliant panelists offline and online. And I will not attempt to summarize what's been discussed and presented. However, let me begin by quoting a statement made by the first president of Indonesia. He said, and I quote, "And do not think that the oceans and the seas will protect us. The food that we eat, the water that we drink, yes, even the very air that we breathe can be contaminated by poisons originating from thousands of miles away." The president's remarks, basically makes us realize how interconnected we are when it comes to water, how the nexus between water, food, energy, and agriculture are intertwined. I think we've heard from our panelists the sustainability of water resources have become a pressing issue for the world. And access to water for Indonesia, it's become a national priority. One of the challenges is to meet the increased demand for safe drinking water and hygiene, as well as sanitation. As in many countries, further improving access to clean drinking water have proven to be challenging, particularly to households for urbanization, climate change, water scarcity at certain times and regions, and including fiscal limitation. I'm very, hopeful that this kind of meeting will sort of drive global action and collaboration on water in the context of agriculture and food systems under the mandate of FAO. In this context, I wish to emphasize 3 points on how we can strengthen our collaboration on FAO-related water initiatives. First, enhancing national capacity on access to water for better food security and nutrition, enhancing the capacity of local governments through assistance and facilitation, as well as advocacy to increase public awareness on how to better manage better household drinking water, as well as national and local infrastructure should be also improved. Indonesia, we have also taken steps to develop sustainable and innovative programs on irrigation with public and private partners that will encourage people to share knowledge, technology, and capacity of our rural farmers. Indonesia is also set to increase food production by developing 1 million hectares of new irrigation network and rehabilitation 3 million hectares of the existing irrigation networks. Second, on multi-stakeholder coordination and collaboration is key. Indonesia has also aligned SDGs with our national midterm development plan to ensure multi-stakeholder coordination and collaboration to achieve 100% access to drinking water and sanitation. Adequate means of implementation and multi-stakeholders collaboration will be crucial for the development of water and sanitation-related infrastructure, particularly to achieve the much-needed target of 2030 agenda. thirdly, we need to improve global coordination and synergy. I think we've all heard the word synergy a few times today and on our water-related works. And I think we should not only bring people together, but more importantly, we should not duplicate or replicate, which will hamper the effectiveness of the work under FAO. FAO work on 2030 agenda, in particular SDG 6, should be mutually reinforcing with other global agendas, including the Paris Agreement, New Urban Agenda, and Sendai Framework for Disaster Reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to also inform that Indonesia will be hosting the 10th World Water Forum under the theme Water for Shared Prosperity. We will be co-hosting the event together with the World Water Council, which will be held between the 18th to 24th of May next year in Bali. It's going to be a multi-stakeholder event. We will be inviting government officials, business leaders, experts, private sectors in particular, and thousands will be expected to be there. It's going to be a platform to engage discussions on sub-themes, several sub-themes. And more importantly, I think it's important also to highlight the key challenges as much as the opportunities in the water sector. And we sincerely hope to see all of you there in Bali next year and to address the common challenges and future of water. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tree, for that wrap-up, a welcome, I think, to discuss further. And I think my own takeaway message is while we wait for the improvement or the enhancement of water decisions in the agenda, I think there's a lot of potential to make that demand very certain, I think, at the country level, to start incorporating them into our plans, our NAPs, just as shared by Paraguay, and to make sure that what is needed for water is accounted for climate action. I mean, what is needed. So thank you so much for being with us today, this late, closing out maybe your conference for the day. And I'd like to give a really special thanks to our speakers, Sultan, Evita, Ethel, Nicolas, and Anna, and of course, Tree. And thank you so much. And also, we had, I think, 15 or so people online. And thank you again, Virginie. I can't see your black screen, but we have a full crowd still. And thank you so much, WaterAid and WWF and FAO for putting this together. And have a really wonderful conference. Many thanks.